Happy Friday, everybody. I'm Nick Slavic. I'm the proprietor of the Nick Slavic Painting and Restoration Company. I'm also the host of this show, Ask a Painter Live. It's a weekly live Facebook show where I use my over 2 decades of experience as a craftsman and an entrepreneur to answer any of your questions. And today is my annual Everything You've Ever Wanted to Know About Decks. So for those of you tuning in who are going to be doing decks shortly, I'm going to give you basically the 1-minute breakdown of how to stain the perfect deck. So here it goes. Number 1, use oxalic acid or off-the-shelf deck brightener, mix it with water, apply it to your deck, scrub it, rinse it off with a hose. Let it dry overnight. Once it's dry, maybe give it 2 days, sand all the rough spots, get rid of all the dust, and then apply a stain. That's basically it. Now, what stain you choose, how you apply it, all that other stuff is kind of, your choice. But basically, small bits of maintenance, a little bit of staining every year to 3 years, does much better than waiting 8 years and then restoring your deck. So we're going to get deep into this, but deck restoration, deck washing, deck maintenance has a lot of myths and mysteries and old wives' tales and things like that. But simply put, use a deck brightener, put it on your deck. Oh, there's Surfer Boy wandering around. Use a deck brightener, get it on the wood. That deck brightener will brighten the wood, it'll loosen the old fibers, and then you can wash it off. I like to scrub in between too, and then just wait for your deck to dry to stain. So there's a whole bunch of different things you can do to a deck. Well, before we get into that, I should say this show is brought to you by the PDCA as well, the Painting and Decorating Contractors of America, and they give us a contractor's question of the week. And the contractor question of the week this week is, what are 3 things that I do to make painting easier for my apprentices? And I thought I would use especially the example of a deck to do that. So number 1, make sure your coating science is airtight. So I've been doing this for 25 years. Hey Shane, how's that? Shane's an expert on wood restoration too. I'd love to hear Shane's opinion on some of this too. But number 1, make sure your coating processes and systems are airtight. You'll be doing your people a favor, all of your apprentices, if you know what you're doing, and then you can teach them what to do. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to send them out to do in the field to do all sorts of weird things to people's houses. So make sure your processes are airtight. Number 2, make sure they have an easy instruction guide. So Gerardo, how are you, my friend? So I'm going through and redoing all the standard operating procedures, SOPs in my company, and they're kind of lengthy. There's videos, there's images. It's basically a laminated flip book as an instruction guide to do every project, but the basis of it is a basic checklist. I make this very easy. I laminate this for them, and this one's black and white, but I have it in color for my people that basically outlines prep, staining, de-prepping a project, and it's a step-by-step guide on what I want my people to do in the field. So number 1, processes are airtight. Number 2, make it easy. And number 3, trust but verify. Have inspection points, have somebody following up, verify that this is done, because the secret to all this is having a plan and then being accountable to it. You can make this all you want, but if nobody follows it, it's useless. So what you have to do is train people how to use it. Well, first, understand what to do, train people how to use this, and then verify at every job that they're using it. So those are kind of the big main 3 things. Get a process down, verify the process, drill the process, and then pretty soon it becomes repetitive for all your people. All right, so let's get into some decks here. This is actually my deck behind us here. I want to say it's maybe 8 or 10 years old. I stain it on average about once a year. I have done every single thing you can do to a deck. I've chemically stripped it completely twice. I've tested out all sorts of products. The only thing consistent that I've been doing with my deck is regular maintenance. I've always used oil or oil-based products, and they've always been translucent. So what you're seeing here is, I'll move my head, that screen door, right? Sorry, I got mirror image so you guys can actually read this stuff today. So when you see this screen door behind you here, that's actually a solid mahogany screen door with just sailboat varnish on it with that nice orange hue. The deck looks identical to it because it has about 10 or 12 coats of stain on it, just a clear or natural or translucent stain on it, and over the years it builds up. I don't get the pleasure of working on that many decks that actually have finish on them. Normally by the time I get decks, they all look like this. So contractors, you know what I'm talking about. Just like, yeah, we've kind of let maintenance slide for a little bit, and we want it to be, we want it to be like this, but it's currently this, and it takes a lot of regular maintenance. So I'm going to basically walk you through my step-by-step process for doing this. Now, guys like Shane Brasseau who are watching, experts in high production, high quality wood restoration. There's a lot of spectrums. He does things a little bit different than me. There's guys who just do wood restoration, large scale operations, things that are called soft washing. They have specialized equipment for applying large volumes of chemical and water and restoring large areas of things quickly. There's production painters like me who have a modified system. We have pressure washers, we have some modified soft wash equipment, we have the ability to do both. And then there's kind of the DIYers who have, sometimes maybe even just an electric power washer, things like that. Years and years ago, I used to just take the biggest pressure washer I could and use brute force to clean decks. And it was fine, and with the right hand, you did a really good job. The only problem is there's a very small margin for error, and what can happen is the high pressure will actually damage the wood. And I know people have seen this. They put a red tip. I actually think I have a red tip. This thing that's almost useful for nothing except writing your name in siding and decks, this will shoot a pencil, a laser point at the deck, and it'll actually chew up all the wood fiber, and you can write your name in cursive on there. So, all right, thanks everybody for watching. Chime in with any of the questions you guys have. Obviously, you can ask anything, but today is my annual deck show. Specifically about decks, and I'm going to show you some custom equipment here, like this guy here, my custom chemical rig that we take around. So not only do we have the SOPs, before you actually get into deck washing, it's very important that you handle the client first, and being honest with them about maintenance is the biggest part of this. Maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I used to get a call back every once in a while for a deck saying, it's been 3.5, 4 years, and it just really doesn't look like the day you left, Nick. What went wrong? What did you not do? And the problem was I wasn't telling them what the actual maintenance regimen on this. I just assumed, like, oh yeah, you read the technical data sheets, you do all this stuff, and it tells you how often to recoat. I recoat my deck every year, sometimes twice a year, and I just figured that everybody sort of knew what to do. And what I realized was the expectations were just off on decks. So number one, you have to be honest with your clients, and I have 4 common product data sheets here, technical data sheets, and if you read through, there's this beautiful little maintenance section, let's see, right here. And basically, as you get less pigment in a product, you have to coat it more often. So on a translucent product, which basically I have on my deck, you really should do it every 1 to 3 years, the manufacturers recommends. But also, if you read closely enough, they'll say, they'll put in a little caveat, or they'll put in a little thing, exemption that says basically, every spring check it, and if it needs it, do it. So, and that explicitly says it here, evaluate finish each spring and maintain as needed. So that basically means do it every year, give or take, if you want it to be maintained. The problem is with decks, if you let some of the finish come off, the wood immediately starts going gray, and then you start having this problem of having to restore that. The best way that I can describe maintenance for decks is almost like oil changes. You don't wait till something goes wrong in your car. You just do it every 3,000 to 5,000 miles. Same thing with decks, although nobody follows it, is regular maintenance is much better. So if you did your deck every 2 years for time and eternal, it'd be way better than doing a full restoration, 3 coats of stain every 5 years in that. So let's see if we got any questions here. Gerardo. Let's see what we got here. Make sure I'm not passing up any questions. What types of oil-based products do you use? Russell. So Cabot is the most readily available, and I usually deal with that stuff. We have Sikkens, and then Sherwin-Williams also has stuff. Benjamin Moore has a local store too that has some of the same translucent stuff. Really, when you get into like translucent natural stains, everybody's got just about the same product, give or take. And the secret is maintenance, not a magic product. If you line up all the natural toned or cedar toned translucent stains, none of them outperforms the other one, in my opinion. I've been doing this a long time. I've used them all. Maintenance will outperform a coating every time. So I would rather take just an ordinary translucent stain, do it every year, and in the end you'll have a deck that looks like this, and not something beat up and gray and kind of nasty. So also with my business, we're doing a certain amount of volume where proximity to the coatings makes a difference too. So I have Benjamin Moore and I have Cabot a mile from my house. My nearest Sherwin's a half an hour away, and my nearest Hirschfield's probably 40 minutes away, give or take. So it kind of depends on where Sikkens comes from. Hirschfield's in my neck of the woods. So sometimes it does matter on a last minute job. You sometimes have to take what's close to you. So Gerardo, have you ever used sodium percarbonate or oxalic acid to clean and brighten? Yes, and we're going to get to that portion right here. The first part of this deck show is going to be, me telling you to brief your client about maintenance. The second part is going to be actually the cleaning, and I'm going to show you all that stuff right in here. So Heather, thanks for watching. All right, so if you look at the technical data sheets, the translucent, it says 1 to 3 years, but then it says check it every year. Then we have semi-solid, which is the next more pigmented stain up there, and it actually says 3 to 6 years. And for everybody who does decks, you know that the spindles will last a heck of a lot longer than the floor. The floor is where the snow and the rain and everything sits, and it's going to wear away much sooner. You're also walking on it. So usually what I say is if you can do the tops of the handrails and the floor every year, every 2 years, and maybe the spindles every 2 to 4 years, maybe 3 years in there on average, that'll be the best way to maintain the deck. Now, whether people do it or not is a whole other thing, and it speaks more to human condition than anything else, but that is the right way to do it. So, all right, Gerardo, do you give any warranty on decks? I do not. I do not, especially when a deck has to be done every year. Most of my people want this finish, a natural finish, and I send them the technical data sheet and just basically say, listen, you got to maintain it. It's a wear layer you're putting on these decks. So obviously if something goes horribly wrong, I'll be there to take care of my clients, but I've been thinking in 12 years of my own business, I don't know that I've ever had any issue with deck, because we get the deck down to raw wood, we brighten it, we neutralize it, and then we stain it. There's really no coating to peel off, there's no coating to discolor, and it's very, it's a very predictable sort of process. So we have solid acrylic deck stain, which is basically like a paint, and normally this would be a 2-coat process to get even coverage, and it says 5 to 10 years. But again, there's that caveat, evaluate every spring, and 5 to 10 years would be, and it always depends. When people say, oh, I don't have to coat it for 10 years, you don't have to coat it ever again if you don't care what it looks like. Start about year 2, maybe year 3, you're going to start seeing the handrails or the floor or places where water drips on or puddles regularly. You're going to start seeing some damage and some wearing away there. So really, again, the spindles might be good for 5 to 10 years, but these stairs that me and my family use every day, you're going to need to coat those a few more times in 10 years, I guarantee you that. So, and then we have certain things like Cabot Gold, and I'm just using Cabot because it seems to me that when a DIY or a pro does their deck, a lot of them kind of dance around the Cabot, give or take, and I'm just using them as an example. Cabot Gold, that's actually one of the last things I did to this deck, was a couple coats of Cabot Gold as an experiment when it first came out. So Cabot Gold, we'll go to the back of the maintenance sheet here. And it says reapply a single coat when the sheen has dulled. So that could be 6 months, that could be a year, it could be 2 years. A deck like this on the north side, it dulls not that often. A deck on the south side, you may see it every year. So it says typically 3 to 5 years, but that's after a 2-coat process with this stuff. So you see they give some recommendations, and what you will say is, listen, I do my deck every year and still my stairs need some work every year. And what your clients will say is, well, the thing says 5 to 10 years, so let's just call it 10 years. And you need to be honest with them and say, like, listen, these are just recommendations. It all depends on what you want your deck to look like. If you want it to look like the day you stained it for time and eternal, you need to do something every year. If you can let it slide for a couple years and then do something, that's fine. But you're going to see an aesthetic difference as the deck as you do that. So, oh man, Mike McGrath, good to see you, man. Thanks for watching. So, okay, washing decks, simplified. Soft washers know their chemicals very well. They mix, they match, they do chemistry, they do all sorts of magic things to houses. For the average house painter, restoration contractor, things like that, all I use is oxalic acid to brighten the wood and loosen dead fibers, and once in a while I'll use sodium hydroxide to actually strip old finishes. Now, there's little Toodles. Hey baby, how you doing? You want to be on the show with me?
No.
Okay.
Nobody look at me with my ticket.
So, number 1, oxalic acid. And I'll show you my custom chemical rig here. But oxalic acid, I actually buy it from chemical companies. It's just a white powder. It's how they brighten paper pulp to make white paper. Oxalic acid is a chemical. When you put it on gray wood fiber, it actually brightens the wood. So this is a 20-year-old piece of cedar, give or take. You can see the old stuff here, just weathered. Nothing's ever been done to it. I basically just took my mixture. I use 8 ounces of that stuff per gallon of water, throw in a little soap to make it sticky, and then I just laid it on here like this, and instantly, I'll make sure I get that on. Yeah, so instantly it does this. This is no scrubbing, no washing, no pressure washing or nothing. I just took my solution, applied, and within a couple minutes it does this. So it's a very powerful chemical, but it's not so caustic that it's going to kill everything around you. And in fact, I've never even killed a plant using that 8 ounces of oxalic acid and water. So If you don't want to go buy bulk oxalic acid from a chemical company, you can just go to any big box store, hardware store, and buy a gallon of the pre-mixed deck brightener. That's basically a solution already of the oxalic acid. Sometimes it'll tell you to mix that 1 gallon with 3 or 4 other gallons of water, and sometimes it'll say it's ready to use. Either way, if you don't have all this equipment, you can just take that stuff in a scrub brush, apply it to your deck, scrub it around, and rinse it off with a garden hose. Now, we want to do sometimes 3 or 4 deck washes a day, so what I did is I built this custom little chemical rig here. This has an AC pump on here that's on demand, so it only turns on when you have the trigger. We have a siphon tube, and I kind of cobbled all this together from different parts here. And we have, I mixed up 8 ounces of that white oxalic acid powder, a bunch of soap. Soap will actually make it sticky, and mix it together with about 4.5 gallons of water here. And the reason I add soap is that oxalic acid in water is basically just water with some stuff in it, and it tends to not stick to spindles and rails. If you add some soap in there, it actually becomes a little sticky, and it makes it nice and wet, and it sort of dwells and hangs on everything and gives it time for the stuff to work. So biggest tip I can give you there is it doesn't matter what you do, probably pre-wet the deck so that you know, the chemical doesn't all soak in and dry right away. Gerardo, I actually don't care what kind of soap we use. I go for cheap. This time they were having a sale on foaming car wash concentrate. So this is like super powered, super clingy sort of paint, soap goop. And we just put a little glug right in there, and it makes everything kind of stick like that. So certainly, I've heard of people using the clothes washing detergent. Dawn is great too. It's always super concentrated and sticks. Honestly, I just go for cheap. I haven't seen a huge difference in a lot of that stuff. I mean, Tide obviously smells a lot better. So what this oxalic acid will do is it will brighten your wood. And let's see if we can get a better shot there. Here we go. It'll brighten the wood. It'll also loosen a lot of these dead wood fibers. So when I applied this, it chemically brightened it, but you're also going to get a bunch of these dead wood fibers. So that's why I use a soft bristled scrub brush to then agitate it. And then we choose as a company to use a pressure washer. So we get, we're running a bunch of Mighty M's right now. We have big ones, we have little ones, and we basically tune them down a little bit, and we use the yellow tip. It seems to have a good volume, and we're not trying to use the pressure of this machine to get the wood fiber and stuff off. We've already agitated with it. We use this for its high volume of water to move a lot of that stuff and chemical off the deck so that we can, you know, it can get dried and things like that. A garden hose will certainly work. It just takes a lot longer to do that. So once in a while you run into, well, maybe this is a good time to show you guys this too. This is basically my little cheat guide for doing decks for people in my company. It's a decision tree where you have a deck, a fence, a playset, a pergola. First question is, do you have to strip it? If you have to strip it, then you actually use a sodium, I can get it for you here. Sodium hydroxide is just a chemical that I order from a company that comes as granules. And basically what we do is I give my people a little instruction here, 12 ounces of that per water, keep everything wet, work in sections, and then you apply it. You can see it eat the oil finish away, and then you pressure wash it off like that. Now, it's got a very sweet spot in it where you have to apply it. You can see the finish wrinkle and you get rid of it. You can't just do it to a whole deck in the sun and leave it. Also, this is going to kill grass and kill plants, so you have to prep the house really well. Also, for pre-finished tin siding and things like that, it could also remove the paint, so you have to be very careful. This will also not work, this stripper, sodium hydroxide. It will not work on water-based finishes. You have to use butyl and all this other stuff, but that doesn't happen too often here. So, and then basically after that, you have this very caustic sort of chemical on the deck, and then you use the oxalic acid to neutralize it. So you're playing on that pH scale. You use a very caustic sort of chemical to remove it, and then you use a very acidic chemical to neutralize it again. But basically, the simple process, 99% of all of our decks are basically apply some oxalic acid mixture or a deck brightener on there, scrub it around a little bit, get rid of that stuff, let it dry, and then you come back and then you sand all the rough spots. So you're applying a lot of water to decks, and when you have bare wood, in this case cedar like this, water's just going to raise the grain, and the handrails on the floor might get a little furry, give or take. As long as you keep your pressure down, it won't get too bad. And then you basically just sand off the rough spots and stain. And I normally prefer one coat staining systems. A little bit of maintenance again goes a long way, but if somebody wants a solid, or they want some Cabot Gold, or some high build, Sikkens 3-coat system, it's multiple coats there. So let's go through here. Russell, do you use the Mighty M surface brush cleaner? I do not. That's a little too strong for decks and things, and we find that it only takes about an hour and a half to fully restore a deck like this. So those things, as most people know of them, they are kind of, big handled things, and they got the big round agitators and sometimes brushes and wobbling spraying tips. Those are great for concrete, hard surfaces, large flat surfaces, but honestly, when it only takes us an hour and a half to restore a deck, and this one, because it's all ground floor, it'd probably only be about an hour from start to finish from all that stuff. We're really not looking for something to do that. But if we had a very, very large deck or a very, very large concrete surface, I think it'd be a good thing there. So Pat Coy, what do you prefer, oil or latex? I'm still an oil guy. I can still get oils, but I'm loving the new hybrids. So a lot of my people, when we do a translucent like this, I still like oil, and they still make it, they still stock it, and there's still a ready supply. I know that on the coast, it's probably not the same thing, but the hybrids are really coming along. I was very skeptical of hybrid deck finishes years ago, but when they first started coming out, I noticed them in the semi-solid, which is a more pigmented stain, but you can still see the wood. I did a bunch of experiments with them, and I actually liked them a lot. I mean, it's really weird from somebody who's a traditionalist and loves oils and polyurethanes and things like that to see this milky finish go onto something, but when that milkiness, that water and moisture evaporates, you're actually left with a pretty nice sort of resiny, oily finish that penetrates very well, and I can get a nice even finish. So in the last week, we've actually done 2 homes with a Cabot hybrid where we've been spray applying into houses, and it's just a beautiful finish, and you really feel like the stuff soaks in well, and you're actually left with a nice resinous sort of, I don't want to call it waxy, but you can tell there's something there besides just chalk and water that pigments these houses, and it's just beautiful. So again, I would love to go water-based finishes with all my stuff. The translucents so far, or the semi-transparents, just aren't there yet. They're getting there, they're getting good, but while I have a cheap, ready supply of oil, we're going to keep going with that, Pat. Thank you for the question, though. Ever get glaze from sanding? So no glaze, that would probably be a sign of you're using too fine a paper on that stuff. I actually have a brand new fence that I built in my own yard here with pressure treated pine. The problem is with new decks, people think, well, new deck, no prep at all, we're just going to go for it. And in reality, what you have to do is the same prep. You should wash it, you should use some oxalic acid to remove any markings and stuff like that, but also you do have to sand a new deck. And I don't know if I can get the good angle here, I'm in the shade, but there's actually something called mill glaze. Let's see if we can get it here. Everything's mirrored, sorry about that. There's mill glaze. When they run these things through the machines actually burnish them, the planers and the joiners, and it actually closes the wood fiber. So the test to see if your deck is ready for stain is you put a couple drops of water on there. If it beads up and stays for a while, you need to do something to the surface. If it soaks in almost immediately, then you know at least the surface is open. On all new decks, we actually do more prep on new decks than we do with existing decks most of the time, between the washing and the sanding and things like that, just to make sure, because if that first layer doesn't soak in and create a nice stable substrate, that deck is going to have problems for the rest of its life, and not a great thing when somebody spends that much money on a deck. So, Mike, do you use a moisture meter? Yes. I carry a moisture meter, for curiosity's sake, in my van. My production manager has one, and then I think we have 1 or 2 more that we sign out to the people in the company, and it's an awesome, awesome tool. I have been surprised so many times by a moisture meter. A moisture meter is as simple as 15 or 20 bucks. It's got 2 prongs on it, 9-volt battery. You jam it into the wood, and it gives you a digital readout of how much moisture is in wood. 15% or lower, and you can go ahead and stain or paint or do whatever you want. Anything higher than that, and you have to let it dry. The reason I said I've been surprised a lot of the times is we had one day this week where we had 2 projects that were a little iffy. It had rained most of the night, it was cool, it was in the 50s, and that just screams it's not going to be good enough. I go out to these sites, I do about 6 readings per side of the house, and every one of them was 10 to 12 to 13, all within range of being stained. So we were ready to go. And normally you would say, if you didn't have that data, you'd be like, oh, let's not take a chance, let's move the crews inside or give them the day off or something else. But because the moisture reading was there, and science was on our side, everybody knows how much I love data, I took images with my phone of the moisture meter. We documented everything, and we said, all right, we're good to go. We loaded all those images on our Google Drive for the folder for that. Proceed with the job. We got a lot of production done. So Mike McGrath, never use a surface cleaner. Agreed. Oh, Dustin Zupanzik, good friend of the show here. Juanita, who makes the hybrids? So Cabot actually makes a hybrid that we use often. Let's see here. And hybrid is basically an oil-water mix. So let me see if I can find a good example of... Yeah, so and again, Cabot is a mile from my house. It's an insanely good product. It's relatively cheap, and they stock a ton of it for me. So the Cabot Semi-Solid is the most frequent hybrid I use. Now they do have they're translucent, the Australian timber oil. I believe some of that is hybridized now. Evidently there must be a huge stock of real oil stuff left around here, because I can still get oil versions of almost everything Cabot makes, including solid oil, deck stain, all that stuff. The reason I'm moving away from a lot of oils with pigments in them is over the last bunch of years, I've been surprised how crappy they've been. We're getting fading right away within a couple years. They're not lasting like they used to. Like, especially Juanita, she lives out on a lake just outside of town here. And as a kid, when I was younger, we used to oil stain with Cabot solid oil all the houses around the lakes. They were all cedar houses. We would get out there, we would put solid color oil on them. They would last forever. They would never peel, they'd barely fade. You could go 7 to 12 years, give or take. It was way better than paint. About 6 or 7 years ago, I was still doing that process, and I noticed fading within a couple years, so I immediately stopped doing that, and I've switched over to acrylics. The thing, I would like everything to be hybridized. I'm still liking the little bit of resin they put in, but the ease of application. But the semi-solid is something we use for decks mostly. It gives you that little pigmented look, and we're doing a lot of house siding with it too. Oh, Surfer Boy, what's up, dude? You want to sit in on the show with me? You're on camera, dude. Say hi. You want to spray the deck in a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, give me a couple minutes, I'll let you do it. All right, yeah, it's a beautiful day here in Minnesota. Thank you. How much time are you giving a new deck to weather? So honestly, this is one of those huge wives' tales that I run into, Pat, where I get a lot of people who say, hey, we built a brand new deck, give it a year, give it 2 years weathering, and then it's ready to go. But in the standard process of prep, you can do the first day what a year of weather can do. And it doesn't matter if you build your deck the same day. Where's our brand new pressure treated wood from the factory? You build the deck, the next day I can stain it well, I shouldn't say next day. The next day I'd be comfortable washing it, letting it dry, sanding it, and then staining it. As long as the moisture level in the wood is below 15%, you're good to do anything you want to it. If you let it go for a year, it doesn't preclude washing and sanding. You still have to wash and sand, and in fact, the deck probably grayed in that little bit of time, so you probably had a little bit of gray on there. Now you have to remove those dead wood fibers, so it may actually be more prep. So people can leave their decks as long as they want, but I'm perfectly comfortable saying you build your deck, I'll come there, wash it, we'll let it dry. As soon as it's below 15%, we'll sand it and stain it. Perfect results every time, Pat. I'd like to know your experience with that stuff too. So Mike McGrath, great stuff. Miss you, buddy. Come to New York and bow hunt. Hey, it's tempting, man. Be careful what you wish for. You may just find me wandering through your woods looking for you up there. So, okay, my chemical pump here. We're ready to spray the deck, and I might even let Surfer Boy do it here if he's hanging out. So, we basically have our water supply here with our siphon tube. We have our oxalic acid mixed up, and for ease of use, I actually use the gray pressure washer hose. So we have the same high pressure hose. You wouldn't need to use one of these hoses, but what I like is not having a whole bunch of stuff to get lost or ruined. So I have this, and you can use this. Well, we actually have two. One goes on the pressure washer, one goes on this. But if needs be, we can have two crews go out, and this hose and actually this lance can be used for both. Now, you don't need all this high pressure stuff. Now, one of the cool things I learned from, like my buddy Shane Brasso, who is watching, and other soft washers, is these multi-tips like this. And if you see them, they're really good for soft washing. They got a variety of tips. They have a large circle orifice, small circle. They got a skinny fan and then a wider fan. And it just allows you, depending on the pressure, depending on the chemical, depending on what you're doing, to apply a lot of chemical or wash a large surface in a very small amount of time. So Gerardo, thanks for watching, man. I understand we all gotta get to work in here. I'm actually liking my Fridays now. Our entire company moved to 4 10-hour days, and now Fridays are kind of like I get a 3-day weekend every week, and it allows me to catch up on all this stuff. So it was nice. I spent most of the morning in the office doing paperwork, and now out here doing this. So I have this thing ready to go, and I just wanted to show you guys how easy it was to apply this oxalic acid. Now again, I have done this DIY style, where you take a 5-gallon bucket of this and the scrub brush, actually Surfer Boy's using, and you just apply it to the deck and you use a garden hose to wash it off. That's perfectly fine. It just takes a little longer. So I'm going to show you how to do how the chemical pump works here, and then I think we're going to call it a day. And any questions you guys have about this stuff, I'll check in before we go today. But otherwise, this is the annual deck show. Any question you guys have afterwards, if you want to even post pictures of your deck, I can give you a prescription of how to clean it, how to restore it, and then what to do to get a certain look too. So, all right, Surfer Boy, you ready? All right, dude, let's do it. All right, Bubba, you want to spray? Yep, come on down, bud. We're going to spray the steps.
Okay.
All right, dude, hold tight. I'm going to adjust the camera before you pull that trigger, all right?
Ready, Dad?
All right, dude. Attaboy. Yep, hold that trigger down, bud. There you are. There you go. Yep, on the spindles too. Hold it down, dude. There you go. Get it. Here you go, bud. Go, hold it down, dude. Okay, that's good, bud. Give me one of those. Thanks, bud.
Are we just doing the stack?
No, we're gonna do the whole deck, dude. You gonna help me a little later with it?
Yeah.
Good. All right, guys. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, Mike Wojan. Monty, thanks for watching. All right, guys. So basically, we applied the chemical. This is just a super efficient way of applying the chemical. We'll then take the scrub brush. Oh, yeah, you don't go on that here. You stay here, bud. I'm gonna get the scrub brush.
Scrub.
Yeah, you basically agitate.
Dad, I know way beyond the deck without stepping on the step. Just right.
So a little bit of soap helps it kind of cling to everything and stick around like that. Well, Surfer Boy's going to climb the stairs, and in this case, I'm just going to use a garden hose. Just spray this one up. Hurry up, bud. I'm going to get you. All right, and a little bit of pressure washing and scrubbing later on the deck. We'll clean it up, but you can see already on the stair treads there, gray wood is now nice, sort of bright stuff there. So, all right, let's see what we got here. I want to hire a Surfer Boy. Boy, if you think I charge a lot, you should talk to Surfer Boy there. What's the chemical used? That is oxalic acid. I buy from a bulk chemical company, but any off-the-shelf deck brightener is basically the same chemistry, give or take. So, yeah. Pat Coy, on average, what's the ratio of oxalic acid to 1 gallon? I use 8 ounces of powder, give or take, but this stuff is 96% pure oxalic acid, give or take, with just a little filler to make it not cake up. But if you buy off-the-shelf stuff, usually I get concentrate if you need to, the liquid gallons, and I think you do 1 to like 3 or 4 gallons of that stuff too. Sometimes it's pre-mixed, but yeah, that's about it, guys. So, all right, thanks everybody. I'll be on here a little bit later to answer any other questions you have. Thank you to the PDCA, the Painting and Decorating Contractors of America, for being good underwriters of this show and good friends of the show as well. So everybody enjoy the awesome weekend. It's finally summer here in Minnesota, and I get to do my own deck this weekend. So we'll talk. Well, actually, I'll show you something cool too. Built a fence there in the backyard, and I'll actually be doing that. Brand new pressure treated pines. So stay tuned for all that. Oh, surfer boy. What a good helper he is. All right, guys, have a good weekend. We'll see you guys later.